Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 219th edition of the Frank and Stan chat. And it's taken a little while. We have had a few sort of hits and misses on this, but we've eventually got Rebecca Leek to come and talk about her book, The School Ready Governor, which is well thumbed. So I've read it all, so I feel able to contribute to this discussion. But hello, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Really good to be here.
And, and
Thanks.
we and we've just found out you've become a little bit of a media star yourself in
I'm a
recent.
media maven. I was on BBC Five Live on Saturday night, and I do two shows on Suffolk Sound, and I'm often interviewed for various things as well. So yeah, I love a bit of radio. Really lovely.
How are you this morning, Stan?
Okay, tired. Busy helping with potty training for my grandchild, and it's. I'm sure it was easier when I was in my 20s. It's certainly difficult. I'm heading towards 70.
I think it is.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how as a younger parent I could get such little sleep and still survive as a teacher. I just don't know how I managed to do that. But anyway, um, Rebecca, do you want to just do a little bit of an introduction as to who you are, and so that people who've never met you don't know, how is it that you're on the Frankenstein chat?
Yeah, so I'm currently an interim head teacher in the east of England. It's my third interim headship, and it seems to be something that I'm good at. The people sort of value longevity, don't they? And they sort of want to see that people have stayed in a job for a long time, which I totally, think is also great.
Yes.
But I really like going in and holding a team at a bit of a choppy time in a school, and I enjoy it. And I really hope for succession, really supporting succession, so that it
Is that
then carries
primary or
on.
secondary or special or?
Currently, yeah, I am. I've sort of landed in primary, so I've done three primary interim headships, and I was a CEO of a little trust for a while as well of three primary schools. Although I did cut my teeth in secondary, so I was initially a Latin and English
Oh,
teacher,
really? Wow.
secondary head of department, trips abroad, that kind of thing, and then was a secondary Senko, and then got a system leader role within a big multi-academy trust, for send and behaviour for a region which had three secondaries and three primaries. So I've sort of hopped between. I've been a secondary Senko and a primary Senko, done a lot of work around send inclusion. I will always say that being a Senko is great training for headship because you understand systemic things and different stakeholder groups and complexity, and assessment and all things. And yeah, then I had that really great experience in a multi-academy trust with very different schools and quite challenging circumstances, and then came across into sort of headship and directors of trusts and that kind of thing.
So, so in
Yeah,
a way, there's no career path, is there?
I totally just swim the currents. I just swim the currents. That's what I do. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
me.
Now, yeah, I think I can't remember how we got in touch, but I was really struck by this book of yours, and it has been really well received, and I can understand why. Do you want to sort of just give us a little bit of a background as to what made you want to write it?
Mm.
Because to be honest, I mean, governance, it's been around for a while, isn't it? What new angle could you bring to it? Must have been the question.
Well, I think, there's so many answers to that question, aren't there? But governance has been around for a while. And I think that there have been over time a lot of people that have done it really well, knowingly and unknowingly. And there are maybe people who haven't really known what to do and haven't really had a resource to go to work it out a bit more. What it doesn't do, I hope you found, is it's not like grey literature. It's not
No.
a handbook in that sense. It's more about the being of governance and how the mode that you have to enter into. There's some practical stuff as well.
There is the second half of it is more that way, isn't it, than the
Mm,
first half? I found the
yeah.
first half particularly interesting.
Yeah. Somebody said to me that I talk about interesting things in an interesting way.
Mm,
So governance is really interesting once you allow it to be, because what is it? It's quite ephemeral, and it's not particularly tangible, and there isn't a clear set way of doing it because we have different types of schools and different types of structures, particularly now in the modern era of schooling and education in England, particularly. Yeah, and so it's something so interesting to delve into, and I just seem to people tell me come at things in an interesting way and make people think about them the way that I write. People like my writing. And so Bloomsbury actually got in touch with me and said, that's a nice way around, isn't it? And so said, books. And I said, well, I could knock you out a book on governance. And they went, okay, although it definitely wasn't that easy in the end. Obviously it isn't. People say, I can write a book, and then golly, you then have to actually do it. And it was a bit of a labour of love, but just an interesting topic that I enjoyed writing about and exploring, and hopefully put together in a coherent way.
There is at the beginning, it talks about the history of governance, which I think is, and at the point you make the journey from Butler through to where we are today in about 6 pages, which is really quite helpful. You know what I mean? Because what you don't want to do is get stuck in all the detail of it. But I was really struck by, I've mentioned it before we were recording, about the bit around this visioning and the operational, and
yes.
Could you just sort of explain a little bit more about, the points you were trying to make about how easy is it, or how difficult is it to avoid not being operationally active when in fact your role is much more a strategic level?
Yes. Yeah. So there's a few sentences that jumped out at me when I was writing. One was, it pulls you out of the mud, I think, is one thing I said at one point.
Yes.
Is if you go for a risk-based approach, so that's sort of horizon scanning. What are the key risks on the horizon for your organisation? And immediately that pulls you, doesn't it, out of the mud. And you go, okay, well, there's a new housing estate over there. Birth numbers are changing, etc., etc. So instead of you talking to the head teacher about whether they should be introducing another vegetarian option in lunch, which could just about be maybe part of a business strategy, well, what's the long-term risk to the school? Could our numbers go up? Could our numbers go down? And how can we prepare and make sure that we're ready for that? Or are we providing will we be providing the right education in 3 years' time for those children? And so it's, if you like, some ways to think about raising yourself up into that more strategic mode. And then there's a chapter in the book which people tell me is incredibly useful, which is about how to go about reforming and working around mission statements, vision, values elicitation.
And that was the best. I enjoyed the read of it all, but actually that was for me the most helpful section. You use the term bike shedding. What do you actually mean by the term bike shedding?
It's a good one, isn't it? In like secondary school, it's like, what does she mean by that? She's talking about going by the bike sheds. So it's linked to the law of triviality, in that our minds naturally go to things that I suppose we all have a bit of an opinion on and is easy to talk about. So, for example, and as we said earlier, I'm on the radio, and so sometimes on Thursday mornings, it's like, what's everyone's favourite biscuit? And we get 20 million comments because it's an easy one. And they go, oh, well, it's definitely pink wafer biscuits. No, it's chocolate hobnobs. And that's what you sort of want to avoid in governance, is don't start talking about which, I said about how many vegetarian options in a lunch or whatever. And the bike shedding, it's a term, people have to buy the book to really find it. But it's the
law of triviality, isn't it?
The law of triviality. And basically, if you've got something really heavyweight on your agenda, like, for example, academisation, which is difficult for people to, be confident about talking about, etc., versus what colour paint we're going to do the new boys' loos. People find it much easier to talk about the boys' loos. And so then if it's not a particularly well-chaired meeting, and if people aren't being disciplined in the way that they're thinking, is that they end up talking about the colour of the boys' loos. It comes from, where should we put the bike shed, or shall we talk about, I think it's a new, I can't remember what the example that's given where the term bike shedding comes from, but basically don't worry about the bike shed, talk about the big strategic questions, and keep watching yourself. Are you being pulled into that? And almost take them off the agenda.
You talk about handling the nuclear power plant.
That's it.
That's the one.
But I think there's also that bit of, I know a little bit about that, and therefore I'm safe talking about it. So, yes. For instance, I know in the governing body that I'm involved with, when we see the plans for the new build, people immediately go to where's the electric coming from? Where's it?
Yes.
Those are all the builders' concerns, not
Yes.
ours. We don't need that. We need to
Yes.
know strategically if we're going to put this new build in place and how we're going to allocate the funds to it. That's really our job then.
Yeah, and asking the questions, well, what if or what if? And then allowing those operational leaders to either go, yes, we have thought of that, and give some answers. That's you, bit of accountability work. Or they maybe haven't thought of that. And so you're just kind of making sure we're all keeping sharp on the key risks and questions. Not, as you say, should we, are you going to put the plugs up there? Because that's what I did when I had a new garage. And it's like, oh, don't talk about that.
That's it. And when you've got a mixture of professionals, let's say people who have professions in a governing body, you can see those when something comes up, an HR issue might come up, and you can see people move forward. And this is now where I'm at, and I'm probably as guilty as any of them because of an education background. I jump in on the purely educational stuff, but maybe there's probably times when I should say just sit back and let the head lead the meeting.
Yeah, I do say also though in the book, don't I? In that it's not a really clear line, and there are times when it's totally acceptable to be slightly operational or give advice as long as it's done in the right way, Stan. So if you do have particular expertise in an area. It's well, I actually did. You would say something in a meeting that says something like, "Well, I've actually have experienced some of these things before. So if you'd like to have a meeting with me and pick my brains over it outside of the meeting, I can, help you out." That's precisely why some of us around the table is because we do have certain depths of expertise that we can bring. It's just how do we navigate that through meetings? Is it for the board meeting or is it for something else? And the structures that we have. I talk about in the book, a small local authority school actually needs some operational support at the village fete from the governors and them saying, can I bring along my, I don't know, extra fence posts that I use for fetes? And we go, yes, please, absolutely. And you could, somebody like, oh, don't get involved, don't be so operational. But, there's different types of schools and different types of models. So it's just thinking about it, being really aware and navigating it in a really intelligent way.
Yeah. I mean, can I pose, and these are unscripted chats, so, I don't know whether you feel able to respond, both of you. But actually, is there a point where there are increasingly more multi-academy trusts, who have decided to sort of diminish the role of governing bodies? In effect, they've moved away from, governing bodies actually approving budgets and even appointing staff, some of them, so this side of it. I'm just interested to know, because I think I know what Stan's view is, can see it on his face, but I'm interested to see, to sort of raise that as an issue, because I know it's something that has been raised in the sector, I think, recently. Stan, do you want to go first?
I'll tell you what I think, Frank, because I'm torn between the two ends of that. I like the idea of a professional there to support the governors in their thinking and what they're doing. But I also like the idea of local representation for schools. So there's a balance, I think, somewhere between what I've called in the past making the governing body actually a promoted PTA who run the jumble sales and the like and aren't really governors at all, to a place where governors run things without the professional advice. I think there's two. It struck me, and it's not the school I'm at; it's another school where the local authority could really have guided the governors better over decisions that they made. And it's resulted in a mess, and I suspect the local authority are saying nothing to do with us. It's a governor's issue, but they could, in my view, have guided them a lot better and a lot sharper, and said, we don't do those things.
Yeah. What's your take on it, Rebecca?
Yeah, so so if we're sticking with the multi-academy trust conversation, first of all, as I've written, is really throw some weight behind your scheme of delegation and make sure, it's not really my position to have a take on it, although I do, which I'll mention in a moment, but from a kind of being a dispassionate author about how to do things and get it right, is whatever the trust board or whatever is deciding wants to do in terms of these local groups versus the centralized trust board. The biggest thing I would say is make sure it's really clear, because it's often not clear. And so that can be put in really clearly into a scheme of delegation. What does the local school board make a decision on, or is accountable for, or gets consulted on, or whatever? And what does the central board do? And so the first rule of thumb is get it really clear. In terms of my personal position on it, I really think that subsidiarity, the concept of subsidiarity, is something that more people need to know about and talk about, and it's really powerful and effective. So what subsidiarity is when the central function is really a subsidiary of the local boards, and so they are an auxiliary help to the local boards, because the local boards, if you can try and keep as much decision making locally as is sensible and is productive for that school, and then the central board, if you like, is a subsidiary of those, to take away some of the annoying bits that lie maybe beyond their capabilities, or it's more efficient that it's done centrally. I mean, it's complicated and there's really no right or wrong answer, but to be aware of that concept of subsidiarity, it's that idea of, a multi-academy trust going, right, here are all your new photocopiers, and in 4 out of the 10 village schools don't actually have room for that photocopier because it doesn't fit anywhere in the school. And so it's, well, where was the best place for that decision to be made? Well, actually, that should have been in the local school, whereas a different contract, which might be something else, could have been made more efficiently or centrally. And as I say, there's no right answer, but it's being really sensitive to those dynamics that happen between the two.
Yeah. I mean, I am a devolutionist, I suppose. So I think for me, but I'm a pragmatist also. I think if a governing body can actually undertake a traditional role and actually can do that successfully, to strip it of its traditional role when it actually is performing effectively seems to me crazy, because it is an engagement with the community. It's closer to the community than a trust board could ever be. So for me, if that board is actually functioning effectively, then for me, we ought to be, that's the aim. We should want everybody to be there. But then there are occasions, and sometimes the reason why schools are not successful is because of weak governance.
Yes.
There is a need for there to step up and to have a different relationship with that governing body, that school.
Yeah, I think what you said about local authorities, I think it is really difficult for them, actually, because in many ways they're right when they say we don't have a remit here, it falls to the local governing body, even though they can see the school getting itself into a pickle. That's really annoying. And I've been on that frustrated end going, why aren't you doing anything? And they go, well, that's for the governing body. And so that needs looking at, actually, or that needs exploring in terms of how to productively have some sort of interventionist roots that are slightly stronger if we're going to continue to have local authority schools. It depends on the area of the country you are, but there are, vanishing breed in some corners, not everywhere, I know.
Yeah. I mean, my history is, I went to become the CEO of the Co-op Academies Trust at a time when the Co-op Group was facing an existential crisis in terms of it was running out of money. And it was running out of money because its governance arrangements around the Co-op Bank were really weak. Everybody assumed that because people, the senior executives from within the Co-op Group were involved, and that a Methodist minister was its CEO, was in charge of the board, that in itself was going to be enough to protect the group and the Co-op Bank. And I've written a lot about the implosion of businesses through weak governance, whether that's the Co-op Group, whether that's Enron, whether that's Royal Bank of Scotland, or whatever it meant, Lehman Brothers. All of these organizations fell away because of the fact that they didn't have strong governance. So, I mean, for me, your book, whenever I read it, I think about, like, I always think of you, Stan, and because you're a governor of a local primary school, yeah. But I think it's very, very easy to see the links between a multinational company and its governance structure falling apart, and that being replicated in a small little village primary school somewhere in Cumbria. The themes are the same. The scale is bigger, but the themes are the same.
Or a political party.
What's that?
Or a political party.
Well, perhaps, yeah. No.
I mean, one of the issues we do have in governance in this country is that we don't have enough of us, and I do feel like it hasn't been. Well, lots of things weren't thought through with the academy movement, but which I do mention, don't I, in that chapter? But gosh, that was such a hard chapter to write.
Why was it hard?
Well, in terms of selecting, so you mentioned this chapter. I do like the history from 1944 Butler Act, in 6 pages all the way to today, and I ended up down various rabbit holes, and eventually I took the strategic decision to take 4 episodes, because otherwise it was like I just can't do it. Yeah. So I took these 4 episodes, and so one of the things, if you like, with academization is we're going to suddenly, particularly with lots of small trusts, the reporting that has to happen. The accounting officer, finance committees, risk committees. Oh, now you have to have a risk and governance and risk committee. Now you have to have a this committee, etc., etc. We need a certain level of governance in all these trusts, taking on board quite a high level of responsibility. Where are all these people coming from? Is a question, and there's a lot of vacancies on boards, and so that needs to. We can't just carry on like that and just go, we'll just, I'm a local authority head teacher at the moment in a primary school, Church of England school. So, there's a certain number of diocesan appointed governors that need to happen as well. We don't have enough. There just aren't enough. And, what are we going to do about it?
Well,
I mean, I've definitely come across schools that have really struggled. And what happens probably in small schools in Lancashire, small village schools, is the governing body actually becomes a group of friends who are attached to the school either as employees or as past employees, and they're not able in a sense to take the hard decisions, because can you really say the head's performance management isn't good when he was my boss 10 years, and my children are in the school and I don't want to upset anything, or it's. I sometimes think that when you look at the makeup of some governing bodies and try and detach what's not somehow linked so strongly to the school that they can't make those hard decisions, that we need a model that not breaks that, because I do want the community involved, but balances it a bit better.
Yeah, I think that's the point I was trying to make about, there needs to be a slightly nuanced approach towards this. I know that you need that scheme of delegation, but also, it seems wrong to break up something that is working effectively.
Yeah.
Purely because it's not working very well somewhere else.
Let's get something for a second.
So,
yeah. One of the things.
Hang on, what's he got here? What's happened here, Stan?
Back in you see the 2 balls that spin around?
No, you're not doing a what's fly ball, are you?
That is the governor.
I know it is. So
that's where it comes from.
I cut that bit out of the book, the what's fly ball. I know.
So that governs the speed of the engine.
I know. Yeah, so, I had that in the book and I had to cut it out.
Wow.
Because it was a bit too out there. Thank you, Stan.
Stan, is that
Thank
one
you
that your
to my
father?
father who built the
I
steam
know.
engines.
We ought to have one episode of the Frankenstein chat where we just go through your father's steam engines, which are all scattered around you. I do like the fact that it makes it look as though you've built them yourself,
No,
Stan.
I've never claimed that.
No, you never
Never,
claimed it,
ever.
but actually, for a passing look at this, you think, oh, that's interesting.
But
Anyway,
you know what that does is it
go on.
moderates the speed. So it's an
Yeah.
integrated part of a system that moderates the speed, and it's sensitive to how fast something's going. So therefore, it naturally will slow it down or speed it up.
Yeah.
And so it's having these things within systems that mean that things don't go too fast or too slow, and they're just gradual nuance, that they sort of self-sustaining nuance systems. And
Right.
actually that is what school governance is that, you know, the school's functioning really well, but if it does that a bit, what the governing body does is it acts as a governor and just goes, do you know what, let's just do that for a bit before we do that. And it's exactly that. I was going to put it in the book and I didn't put it in.
Wow. What are the chances of that?
Brilliant.
Well, I can recommend the School Ready Governor. There's a link on, if you're watching on the video, there'll be a link and an image of that at the back of the video, and it's also going to be on the cover, I think, of our little video as well. So, congratulations, Rebecca. Is it the first and only, or have you got another one coming?
I'd love to write loads of books, actually. I do love writing. And actually, talking about us not having enough governors, some people have said that it's quite inspiring. So people have read it and gone, actually, I think I want to become a governor.
Oh,
and, you know, it's not dry, is it? It's like, it's quite a lovely read.
No, it is. I mean, it's funny. We in our job, we have to read. You know, I certainly have to read quite a few sort of academic papers, and it's hard work. You know, and when you get a book that is, and it's not just yours, Rebecca. There's a couple over there. The one that came from. Let me get it.
Oh, drum roll.
Yeah.
What's it going to be?
This hefty thing,
Yes.
has been criticised and also applauded. I mean, for me, this is a very easy read. It's 600 pages, and it's dead easy to read. You know, and it's not an academic book, but it does get you thinking. And I think your book is on the same sort of level as that. To be honest, I think it's a very easy book to go through. And if you're involved in governance, you can relate to it straight away. So well done.
Thank you so much.
Right, what's caught your eye this week, Stan?
A report that children aren't, I think the phrase was school ready, but we were talking about children still in nappies in I'm assuming it's in reception, not in nursery.
Well, yeah.
Reception. We hope that they are by reception. Nursery, it's fair enough.
And as a grandparent, we are going through that period with our 2 nearly 3-year-old grandchild to learn potty training, and I have to say it's a commitment. And I just think maybe I don't think we should have children in nappies in reception, but I think there will be people who will need more help than perhaps they are getting to get their child to that position, because it is a commitment. You need to read up about it. You need to have some consistency in what you're doing. And if your home is chaotic anyway, then the chances of that happening are much less. And I also think, and this is my own theory, there's nobody else involved in it, that modern nappies make it more difficult for young children, I'm talking 2-year-olds, to know what's going on, because they're not in an uncomfortable position as they were with Terry's nappies.
I was a cloth nappy mum. All my 3 cloth nappies.
Our first child was, but I'm not wanting to bring back the bucket at the top of the stairs.
Oh no, I accept that, Frank, but it's understanding that the 2-year-old doesn't know what's going on because they have no feeling of it. There is no feedback, if you like, because the nappy soaks it up, so they're not feeling uncomfortable. Nappy changes are organised by adults, not by them, and I just think there's a reason why it's probably harder than, you know, whenever somebody puts something on about children not still being in nappies, you get the brigade that say my children were toilet trained by 6 months old and writing and drawing by and I just think, if you don't understand that some people's homes are chaotic because of the way those people have either been brought up or their working strategies or whatever, then those things are harder. And rather than just stamp your feet and say, this is wrong, we should be, I think somebody says, look further down the river and find out why that is.
Yeah.
And we've probably lost the kind of help, I'm 150 now, so I can remember as a child going to the clinic once a week and being given a bottle of orange juice and being weighed and all those things.
Yeah.
And I just don't think we have that level of support anymore.
No.
Maybe Sure Start would have developed that had it been allowed to grow.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my theory on nappies. My theory on
I
support.
think I'm old enough to know also that, my father used to work 3 shifts, and so that was quite difficult to manage. Both in terms of us as kids being at home, my father being asleep, but also the sort of it meant there was no real stability in terms of who was going to be around. My mother didn't work for much of her life until we were older, and then she went to work. Not because they were wealthy; they were far from it. But it was just really that's what you did. So in a way, there was a sense of a little bit of order had to be there because my father was probably asleep, working nights, and so in a way, but my mother was that constant sort of pusher on this. Whereas now, sort of life is, I don't know, seems to be a little bit more complicated in terms of when parents are working or they're not working, and men and women are working, so the challenges are greater, I think.
And childcare is, I think, much more away from
Yeah,
parents
yeah,
now than it
yeah.
used to be. We're going to what we're going on to now, 10 hours, or is it more free childcare from
Mhm.
2? So that responsibility now almost lies with the carers rather than the
Yeah,
parents,
yeah,
or both.
yeah,
Yeah, I think with technology as well and busyness, I think we think that we can achieve more than actually we can achieve. And so, we can sort of outsource our organisation to Google calendars, etc., etc. But actually, we do have to remember that time to bring up children and family making and community takes time and takes time. You can't outsource that.
No.
And so maybe we've kind of got a little bit, there's a bit of an illusion that, well, the world will just run, the washing machine will run and the computer will run and the emails will run and everything's automated, therefore I can do hands-free parenting. There's no such thing as hands-free parenting.
And I have to say, for those of my generation, there's no such thing as hands-free grandparenting.
Rebecca, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, I'm just so glad you talked about grandparents actually and nappies. So my gorgeous dad, who was also difficult, so complex relationships with parents. There's no denying I've got one of those. But my gorgeous and complicated father is, I said to you before, and I said to somebody this week, I think he's talking to Dumbledore on that final platform at the moment. Oh, I'm going to cry. Oh. So he's kind of on his last station. I mention him in the book as well. I say here, I've trawled my own memories. My father was a school governor, although the details are quite hazy, etc., etc. So that's on page 2, if you want to dip in there. But I was at the care home on the weekend, and there was the James Taylor album, and along comes the song "The Secret of Life is Enjoying the Passage of Time." And I don't know if enjoying is quite the right word with sort of grief, but there's no bypassing of it, is there? And so it's sort of trying to remain present in that, all the stuff that's happening with me and my dad. And he was a really great grandparent for the years that he was given, and then Alzheimer's took over. So nappies, grandparenting, and enjoying the passage.
So was he a James Taylor, or is he a James Taylor fan?
Totally James Taylor. I was brought up on Simon and Garfunkel, James Taylor, the Carpenters, that kind of era. I was brought up on all that. So that's the fact. That's my kind of, talking of radio, I do this show on a Sunday and I do all decades, but there's nothing like one of those to get the Sunday morning vibes going.
We saw the best concert we've ever seen, which was Paul Simon and James Taylor in Hyde Park years ago.
Yeah.
James Taylor started with just after Donald Trump had been made president, and he started off by saying, can I just say I'm very sorry, and it won't last.
Well,
Yes.
I've seen James Taylor in concert probably about 15 times.
Have you?
Yeah, so whenever he has been on tour, the first time I saw him was in the early 80s, and every time he's been on tour, he generally does a UK tour every couple of years. So yeah, and it is, I mean, it was his birthday this week actually. But the thing is for me is that I remember him as a sort of like, I think I saw him in his late 20s. So
Mm.
but now he's in his sort of later 70s, and the voice isn't quite the same as it used to be. But and so for people that go now, they think it's great, but I always say, for me, it is the passage of time. And
Mm.
actually, the concert has morphed into a sort of more melancholy, more reflective piece, whereas in the early 80s, it was, wish bang bang, everything was happening.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really, but I bearing in mind grief, and I was going to mention something else, but I'm going to go to this, is that it's this week. It's the anniversary of my brother's passing, and Barry was an HMI in Estin, and when you said before about English and Latin,
Mm.
his A levels were English and Latin, and French, and he took English and French at York University, and then became an HMI after being inspected as a head of English in a North Wales school. And Barry was a guest on our chat a couple of times, and it's quite sort of. I think Stan always said that if he had met my brother before he met me, he probably would have been more friendly with my brother than he was with me. But I have to say, I mean, there's some of the things that can just sort of. One of the things that Barry was really wedded to, because we had a slot which said, if you could change one thing, what would it be? And he said that he would go back to school-based assessment for GCSE.
Mm.
Yeah, so his view was that the strength of the collaboration that was required in moderating it across different schools in order to achieve what was the acceptable standard was a major strength that has been lost from the system. And in
Mm.
a way, it sort of made schools, they had to open up their books.
Mm.
Had to demonstrate and prove that the grade that was awarded. And of course, Barry would say that, and if others felt they couldn't sustain that grade, then actually that affected all the grades
Yes.
in the school. So its impact, the importance of being accurate at that moderating meeting was really important. And
Mm-mm.
so it always struck me as somebody who's not a great fan of the GCSE system.
Sort of lateral governance, isn't it? So
It
there's
is a little
governance
bit,
within
yeah. It
across
is,
our system like
yeah.
that too.
But it's
Yes.
just more collaborative. And also it places. I mean, you do need external controls over that, But actually, for me, it does go back to the heart of the power of the teacher, and we've taken that away. And in a way we have again a system where was it 33 or 34% now do not achieve that grade, and that whether or not the standards have gone through the roof this year, we're going to determine that a third of you are not going to get it. That feels to me wrong. And I think that was something that drove Barry as well round the twist as well. So I just really wanted
I
to
always
acknowledge.
refer to the very first primary SATs, Key Stage 1 SATs, where it said if the SAT outcome doesn't agree with the teacher assessment,
Yeah,
then the teacher assessment takes precedence.
Mm.
yeah,
Can you imagine trying to get that through now?
yeah. I know.
Well, happily, we don't have Key Stage 1 SATs
I
anymore.
know.
So let's just
Well,
finish on that celebratory note.
also, just finally before we do finish, what's your thoughts on phonics screening and year 4, basically table tests?
I quite
You,
like them.
you
Yeah,
quite like them.
I quite like them. I like a check. So for me,
A
they're a
check.
check.
Yeah,
Actually,
Um,
Frank, I think the children, certainly the evidence I've got in the schools that I go in,
they like
using
them.
times table rock stars or something,
Yeah,
that the children love doing it.
mm. There's a few issues with the phonics, which is I will get too technical, so I won't go into it. So I think there are some issues with the phonics screening, but I like a check within a primary school. I think it sets you a little, you've got to squeeze in, so to speak, for that
right.
event, and so you go for it and you make sure that children are being, I've worked in some quite interesting and challenging settings and areas, and it certainly gets children going, and
Well, this is the power of Frankenstein chat that will make me reflect on my views.
Okay.
So, thank you, Rebecca.
I'm definitely for checks and balances, but what I'm dead against is you failed.
Sure, exactly. So there's a lot of conversation around it, isn't there? It's just you could open it up and then we could keep talking forever.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And the language is used because even heads who don't want to think about when they're reporting things, they'll say, "Yeah, we had 3 children who failed their phonics test." Well, did they fail, or were they just not ready?
Just not there yet. Not there yet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Rebecca, for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Again, The School Ready Governor by Rebecca Leek is available from all good bookstores, and you can get it from Amazon if you choose, but I think you prefer to get it from your local bookshop. But anyway, until next week, thank you, Stan. Thank you, Rebecca, and good luck, everybody. We'll see you all next week. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.